Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and in today's video let's have a look at the cruise procedures for the Airbus A300 from iniBuilds. The first thing that we do when reaching the cruising altitude is verifying that the thrust mode went into the correct mode, so it's in CR, and then we're going to go down to the TCAS and select the below mode. Now this is going to extend the range at which we see aircraft that are below us, and that has the big advantage that we get a better picture of what's going on underneath our aircraft. Now you might be wondering, why is that important? Well, two things. First of all, when you have an emergency descent, you would be turning off your airway. So let's say a decompression happened and we would be turning 45 degrees off, either to the left or to the right. If we've got our TCAS in the below mode, as indicated by the below sign down here, that basically tells us that we can get a better picture of what is happening beneath our airplane. Also, let's go ahead and switch the weather radar to something like 1 degree down, which is usually a very good indication of the weather that lies ahead. The 1 degree down setting of the weather radar has a certain advantage. If you've got a weather indication, for example over here 80 nautical miles out, and the thing is in 1 degree down, then that tells you that that weather is 8,000 foot below you. Like that, by turning the tilt of the weather radar up and down, you can easily determine where the associated weather is, giving you a good idea of the picture of what's going on around your aircraft. Now, next up, we got to do regular checks of our ECAM. Those are supposed to be done at least once per hour, and it doesn't matter if it's the pilot flying or the pilot monitoring carrying out those checks, they simply need to be done. So why are we doing those ECAM checks? After all, the ECAM would alert us to anything that goes wrong, wouldn't it? Yes. However, it helps to do those checks because there are certain thresholds which are going to trigger ECAM cautions. And if we manually monitor the systems, then we can get an idea of what's going on and of trends in our airplane performance without the need to rely on things exceeding limits before we can take action. So let's start and go for it. We're going to start up here with the engine page, and then we're just going to move through all the pages. So on the engine page, we're just making sure we've got things like the oil pressure, the oil quantity is looking good. We have a look at the vibrations to make sure that they are within normal limits, and the engine bleed and the fuel pressure are looking good as well. Then we can move on to the hydraulic systems. Over here we verify the hydraulic quantity and the hydraulic pressures on each of the indications. Now, this one is particularly important because the hydraulic quantity is going to slowly decrease in flight and decrease depending on the system status. And if an hydraulic leak were to occur, then we would be able to see it over here when doing regular checks, most likely before the system is actually going to alert us to a fault being present. That can be vital when flying ETOPS flights and when being at a far distance from your next airport. Moving on then to the AC electrical page, we have a look at the load of the generators, the IDG temperatures, and just making sure that everything is connected properly, as you can see over here. Now, over there we can now go on and have a look at the DC electrical page. And over here again we have a look at the load of the TRs. We verify that our batteries are operating normally, and personally I've had it a couple times already that going through the normal system checks, one of the 3 batteries has been showing amber. Typically the Airbus takes a little while to correct that automatically. However, it is good to notice these things early, and it is good to inform maintenance of these trends of the systems as well, which may not necessarily be transmitted automatically through the ACARS. Alright, then we can move on to the bleed page. Over here The most important thing for us to check is that the bleed is actually equally distributed, or to see if, for example, one pack may be fluctuating and stuff like that. Packs fluctuating is something that we see rather often as well, and is again something to keep track on in an airplane. Also, apart from that, we can check if, for example, the high pressure valve may be open because the intermediate pressure valve is not providing sufficient bleed air. Stuff like that gives you a good idea of the condition of your airplane system on the bleed page. Then we can move on to the air conditioning page. Over here we just make sure that we receive proper temperatures, not only in the cockpit but also in the cabin, and that the air supplied to the cabin is at a decent temperature as well. Moving further forward, we go to the pressurization page. Over here, the most important thing for us to check is the position of the outflow valves. For example, if our outflow valves were completely closed and the cabin altitude would be constant like it is right now, that would indicate that we have a that we have a pressurization leak anywhere in the airplane, wherever that may be. Likewise, if one of the outflow valves was completely open, but the cabin pressure is still constant, then our airplane might be working on the limit of what it can do, and that may be an indication that we are running into a possible slow decompression over the time. So again, something to keep an eye upon. The status of the outflow valves is going to give you a very good indication of the overall performance of your system. Then moving on to the fuel page, most important for us over here is to check the fuel quantities are equally distributed. You can see, for example, that the left side here has a little bit less fuel than the right hand side. Now that can be explained by the APU that we used on the ground. So the APU has been using fuel from the left tank, that's why we've got a little bit less in the left side than we got on the right side. You don't need to consider balancing it out until you eventually get an ECAM caution about it, but just have a good eye on what's going on in here and how the distribution is. Then we can move on to the APU. Obviously that is shut down right now, so we don't get any indication on there. Next to the flight control page, again an interesting page to monitor throughout the flight to make sure that all the flight control surfaces are distributed in a way where we would expect them to be. For example, if our airplane had a bird strike and has got some physical damage, then we might see the ailerons constantly slowly deflected or stuff like that. So, good idea to have a look at the flight control page to see in what kind of status your aircraft actually is. Then we can move on to the doors, and obviously we want to see them all closed. They may occasionally show different indications than closed in case something is wrong with the sensors, for example, or in case a door is freezing over. Happens every now and then. And finally we can have a look at the wheel page. On this one we are particularly interested in the temperature of the brakes, because we want to know if they are fit for use for the landing. So if a brake temperature was exceptionally high, for example, that might indicate a possible problem. Now, the brakes may also heat up because of a fire going on somewhere nearby. Stuff like that you want to have a look at on the wheel page. Finally, as we are flying along, we also want to compare our fuel burn with our flight plan. And we basically do that once every 30 minutes, but latest once every 60 minutes by comparing what we are burning and how much fuel we have used, adding that up. So for example, we can say our fuel used over here is now roughly 10.6. So we've used 10,600 pounds of fuel. We've got 14,800 on board. If we add the two ups, we end up at 25.4, and that is roughly what we have loaded up on the ground as well. So that's a rough gross check to make sure that we are not waste or that we don't have a fuel leak. Alright, that's the most important things we do in our cruise flight. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do let me know by pressing that like button below the video. Subscribe if you're up for more, and then I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one doing our descent preparation. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you really love my videos, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.